Hey everyone, and welcome to another Konoha Reviews. Today we take a look at the classic game Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway, the third entry in the main Brothers in Arms series, though some might even say second, since to a few Earned in Blood felt more like an expansion. The reason why I wanted to tackle this particular game and not start with Road to Hill 30 is because recently I saw the movie A Bridge Too Far again, and that really made me in the mood for some Operation Market Garden type missions or games. Now, since Operation Market Garden ended in failure, you often don't have many games that revolve around it. Maybe a few missions in the Medal of Honor here or there, but otherwise, nothing too much. Hell's Highway, on the other hand, fully focuses on this operation and my home country of Holland. Back when the first Brothers in Arms came out, I remember it being a big hit and the anticipation of the game was incredible, as this was supposed to be a very realistic depiction of the war, unlike the unrealistic ego shooters like Medal of Honor or the roller coaster rides like Call of Duty. Brothers in Arms promised to tell the story of the 101st battling at Normandy, in towns and clashes that really occurred during the war. Now, not every battle, of course, was historically accurate, but I remember very well that they based the locations and geometry on actual photographs and imagery of the time to make it as authentic as possible. In fact, a famous quote of some of the creators is that if you were to play the game, you could get a part-time job as a historic tour guide, as all the famous buildings and landmarks would be exactly there where they are in the game. Now, this of course was a bit of a joke, but still really showcased the dedication and effort they went into making the stories, events, and locations believable. So therefore, I was obviously very excited when they announced Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway and that it would all play in Holland, and I expected them to take the same care in portraying the war, battles, and locations realistically. But unfortunately, Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway had a very rough development process, and the game got released 2 years after its original release date. The game was also plagued by an E3 trailer that was not actually in-game, but promised really cool features that would not make it in the end product. Because the graphics in the trailer also turned out not to be in-game, the Hell's Highway game we got in the end was uglier than what we saw. Other famous examples of this are Killzone 2 and Aliens Colonial Marines, another game from Gearbox. And so the game was finally released, but ended up being the seemingly death of the Brothers in Arms franchise. It wasn't necessarily a financial failure, but Gearbox started to prioritize on other projects more, like Borderlands, and even gave us the crappy promise of an Inglourious Basterd-style Brothers in Arms game, a really distasteful product to link to the Brothers in Arms franchise, in my opinion. But what about the game itself? Well, unfortunately, I remember not being very impressed with it when I played it when I was younger, and I was even less impressed now. It's not all bad, and there's definitely some fun to be had here, but in my opinion, it's quite messy and some really weird decisions were made with this game. Let's start with something that bothered me, but might not bother most of you who will play this. Where I believe that Gearbox took so much care in recreating authentic battles and environments with the first Brothers in Arms games, I can wholeheartedly tell you that they did not do this with Hell's Highway. I'm Dutch myself, so I know the countryside, the towns, and the villages, and the overall vibe, and it looks unfortunately nothing like it. Sure, some of the houses do look Dutch with their distinct rooftops, but many look generic and lack any Dutch aesthetic. Sure, some of the landmarks are indeed there, but that's about it. Were they promised to have many areas in the first game accurate to the point of the street and building layouts with photographs and everything? That is not the case here. The first Dutch character you meet, Nicolaas, is in the first cutscene not even being voiced by a Dutch person. Later on when you meet him, he is indeed Dutch because they suddenly swapped voice actors. I'm not sure why this occurred, maybe they had an error with their time schedule where they forgot to record the dialogue with him in the first cutscene, but it just feels sloppy and hastily. One of the reasons why it also does not look like Holland is the exaggerated contrast and bloom used to make it look like a fantasy land. You can clearly see it when compared to World War II films that were actually filmed in Holland of just how different it looks. In my opinion, the game that nails Holland the best in terms of looks is Medal of Honor Airborne. Now, I believe that level to be Nijmegen, whereas Hell's Highway does not tackle that, but still. Also, Medal of Honor Frontline gets the job done pretty well. But again, to many of you who are not Dutch, you might take it all for granted and take the game's word for it that this is accurate. Unfortunately, Even then, there's still enough to criticize in my opinion. The game's presentation is very underwhelming, with characters' faces looking really derpy and scary a lot of the times. They are very clearly the same characters' faces from the first game, but now more high-res, but they lack any sorts of emotion or feeling, which at this point in time, games could do plenty. Sound design is also pretty bad, with many sounds missing or feeling underwhelming in cutscenes. It just lacks polish. The game also involves you in really cheesy missions that don't feel realistic at all and try to add drama to a game and story that really doesn't need it. Examples are Frankie, a young kid in your company that falls in love with a Dutch girl who doesn't speak a word, by the way. They kiss once and that's it, but anyway. He goes on his own to save her when Eindhoven comes under attack and you need to go after him to rescue him. It's a very cheesy and boring storyline that doesn't go anywhere. The girl was shot outside a hospital and Frankie is shot dead there. In the game, they try many times to get an emotional reaction out of you, but it simply doesn't work and feels unearned. The game is too short and you don't feel attached to many of these characters except the ones that were more present in the first game, like Baker, Hartsock, or Corian. Therefore, the most emotion this game got out of me was at the end when it was revealed that Hartsock would be paralyzed and would be going home. It was a very effective way of saying goodbye to one of your men without him actually dying. Another cheesy part in the game is where you go out to rescue the little son of the Dutch character Nicolaas, and apparently the kid took his dad's gun for revenge, and he even manages to kill 3 German soldiers, which is in and of itself quite cheesy. But anyway, there's this awful part where you are on the roof with a sniper and need to cover the kid as he heads towards a shop to hide. You kill so many soldiers in this segment, all to just save one little kid, and it feels very Hollywood and Disney in that regard. The first 2 games really went about the war itself and the men in your company. That angle and that approach gets lost sometimes in Hell's Highway, and it makes it a worse experience than the earlier entries. Now, a movie like A Bridge Too Far still shows that there can be some stories or drama on a more personal level with the civilians, like the inhabitants of a Dutch house who need to sacrifice their homes for the soldiers to use as a temporary headquarters or sickbay. But instead, we get the cliché love drama or rescuing a child. And then there's a weird solo level, where you are on your own and the game introduces these weird horror elements. Part of the story of Hell's Highway revolves around Baker slowly losing his mind to trauma from losing his men, but also a secret he has been hiding about Leggett and the death of Alan and Garnett. So at a certain point, you start seeing gory flashes and even ghosts, and eerie sounds and music can be heard. It's a very weird tonal shift, and again something that is such a weird choice to add in this game. Just as the choice to add this solo level where you are entirely on your own, and it's just quite boring since the shooting mechanics are not as smooth as many other shooters out there. The overall Hell's Highway game is much easier and requires less strategy than the previous 2 games. It's very clear it took influence from games like Gears of War with recovering health and a cover system, but it makes the game easier to play as Rambo. In fact, most of the times when you enter a house, your teammates will not follow you and you will be again by yourself. Since you cannot use the flanking and positioning mechanics, there you have to play it more like a Call of Duty or Medal of Honor game, but it's not as good or responsive. Now, I've been ranting on the game for a while, and does that mean there's nothing to enjoy at all here? No, they're still fun to be had, and I'll address these things as well. But compared to Road to Hill 30 and Earn in Blood that set the bar so high, this is not only one step below, but several. Things that are okay and good are the game's physics, including destructible environments. This adds some really cool and unique opportunities if you have an MG or bazooka team, as you can blow away cover, but the enemy can do the same thing to you. The level design themselves is pretty okay, with often offering multiple possibilities and flanking maneuvers to pull off. And lastly, I would also say that the tank segments are very fun. Now, they are not realistic at all, and the tank segments in the earlier 2 games adhered more to that, but now you can actually manually fully control the tank and wreak death and destruction everywhere, and that's when it's just fun. It makes you realize that maybe not with the Brothers in Arms name attached to it, it might have scored higher, but at that point, Brothers in Arms had made such a good impression that expectations were high, maybe even unrealistic. It's strange that a game on the next-gen consoles for that time would feel more arcadey than its predecessor on previous hardware. I think Hell's Highway is only worth your time if you really cannot get enough of World War II games, of which there are plenty, including many that are better. But in the end, Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway gets a 6.8. In the end, the game actually hints about snow, meaning that the next entry would be the Battle of the Bulge. Now, of course, we never got the game, and for those who want to experience World War II's journey in the style of Band of Brothers, might be better off with the Call of Duty entry. It's a shame that Brothers in Arms died this way, since it's been 12 years since its last release, but maybe someday it will be resurrected.